Good afternoon. Today in the video you will learn about the tense offensive of the Russian army on Avdiivka, about the predicted future situation on the front, as well as we will talk about the beginning of a serious war in the Middle East and the important events that took place on January 12th. Let's start with the situation on the Ukrainian front. Monitoring publics have not recorded significant changes in the front line with one exception in the area of Seversk in the Donetsk region. Russian troops have slightly advanced to the southeast of the city. The georeferenced footage shows Russian troops advancing along the railroad line north of Vesela. The Russians are also preparing for another attempt to storm Avdiivka with a high degree of probability. The expected direction of the attack is between Stepno and the Avdiivka coke plant to eventually cut the highway west of Avdiivka. Previous Russian attacks on the plant have failed. With hindsight on the plans attributed to Russia to go on a major offensive, Ukrainian publics are discussing the quality of Ukrainian fortifications. The source showed us a video of the Russian fortifications taken by the Russians themselves. It shows a branch trench system hundreds of meters long, up to 2 meters deep and up to 1.5 meters wide, which allows 2 soldiers in gear to move freely and easily get separated. The passages of the connections are blocked, giving the possibility to move stealthily, including from thermal imaging. And to keep the air temperature and microclimate stable, the fortifications have electricity, a water drainage system that makes waterlogging and swamp formation impossible, as well as camouflage positions for shooters and foxholes for protection from artillery fire. Ukrainian fighters say that the Russian army pays a lot of attention to building defensive fortifications and spends a lot of resources on it. When the Russians take some positions, they immediately start digging, chopping, working with saws and construction equipment. They also have people who are engaged strictly in digging and trench construction, and not as in our case. A fighter both storms and builds, and deals with all other issues. We can conclude that Ukraine continues to have a negligent attitude to the construction of fortifications. After all, even in the most threatening areas, where the enemy has a chance to enter the operational space, the defense system leaves much to be desired. Speaking about the prospects of the war, Vladimir Zelensky today made a forecast for the near future. In his opinion, Russia plans to achieve tactical successes on the battlefield before the presidential elections in March, and then it will prepare global actions. That is, apparently, a major offensive, although the president did not say so directly. At the same time, the head of Ukrainian military intelligence Budanov said essentially the opposite. In his opinion, drones and the density of mines do not allow to go on the offensive either Ukraine nor Russia. We know the solution for drones is electronic countermeasures. Mines require specialized equipment. This brings us back to the issue of production capacity. Nothing is unsolvable, but everything must be taken into account. Let's move on to the good news from the outside world. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak came to Kiev. He announced a £2.5 billion, $3 billion aid package. This is the biggest package from Britain since February 2022. It will include hundreds of thousands of shells, anti-tank weapons, long-range missiles, and training for the Ukrainian military. £200 million will be allocated for new drones, most of which will be manufactured in Britain itself. But the main news of the visit is that Sunak signed an agreement with Volodymyr Zelensky, which the media dubbed a security guarantee agreement. Although its official name is the Treaty on Security Cooperation between Ukraine and Great Britain, the term of the agreement is 10 years. Despite the fact that both sides have already declared its historic significance, it basically just formalizes the assistance that Britain already provides to Ukraine. And it does not contain any obligation for London to enter the war on the side of Ukraine in case of a new Russian attack. In such a case, the treaty contains only a few obligations of Britain: to start consultations on further actions within 24 hours, to provide Ukraine with various military aid and military equipment, to impose sanctions against Russia, that is, to do everything that Britain has already done after February 24, 2022. Moreover, in the treaty, which the Ukrainian president called an agreement on security guarantees, the word guarantees itself appears only once and in the context of Ukraine's obligations, not Britain's. In other words, this agreement is mostly of informational and political significance to demonstrate Britain's unchanged support for Kiev in a difficult military situation for Ukraine. as well as in the context of continuing uncertainty over further assistance from Ukraine's main Western partner, the United States. A deal between Democrats and Republicans over approval of that aid in Congress, by the way, once again threatens to collapse. Johnson said Republicans would oppose any new aid to Kyiv unless the agreement included tough immigration restrictions and continued construction of a wall on the border with Mexico. Democrats, on the other hand, agree only to new funding for border security. They have said they are ready to block passage of any such Republican initiatives, even if they include aid to Ukraine. But the Republicans insist on their own, in such circumstances. The signed agreement between Ukraine and Britain is intended to demonstrate that the Allies are ready to continue helping Ukraine, but it is clear that any support from Britain will not be able to fully replace support from the United States. Therefore, the issue with the latter remains one of the key issues in terms of further prospects for the war. The European Commission is offering Hungary a compromise for allocating aid to Ukraine. Budapest wanted to review the funding annually, being able to get bonuses each time in return for its vote. Brussels is proposing to give Hungary the option to stop or renegotiate the aid allocation halfway through 2025. Asked whether these concessions would be enough for Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán to lift his veto, a senior Hungarian official said it was not yet possible to say for sure, but he believed it was likely yes. On the night of Jan. 11-12, U.S. and British military forces struck the Houthi-controlled part of Yemen. Washington and London declared it a response to Houthi attacks on ships in the Red Sea. The Houthis say they are attacking ships traveling to Israel or belonging to Israelis in response to the Israeli army's actions in the Gaza Strip. The consequences for Ukraine of any new aggravation in the Middle East are obvious from the war in the Gaza Strip, and they are negative. The world's attention is shifted from Ukraine to a new war. The flows of weapons needed by the AFU are redirected. The West, which is increasingly accused of double standards, is also under serious pressure. Moscow is preparing a lawsuit in advance to thwart any attempts by the U.S. or the European Union to confiscate the frozen assets of the Russian central bank in favor of Ukraine. Officials in Moscow believe that confiscation of these assets is unlikely. Nevertheless, Russian bankers are preparing an agreement with international law firms that would protect the Kremlin's interests in case Russian assets are alienated. The Kremlin has also commissioned an expert analysis of international financial legislation and similar precedents in global practice. The Russian central bank declined to disclose its plans, although its head Elvira Nabiullina said that the alienation of Russian assets would be a very negative signal to other countries. In turn, Russian presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the Kremlin would challenge the confiscation in court, adding that Moscow could retaliate. Thanks to all who watched this video. If you want to stay up to date and get the latest news, then subscribe to our channel and click on the bell to not miss new releases.